They came to me with a commission. Write a mass for the dead. I did not know yet it was mine.
The world built a cathedral around this man, child prodigy, divine gift, God's own instrument, born into a Salzburg tailor city and delivered to the courts of Europe before he was old enough to shave. By age 6, he performed for Empress Maria Theresa. By 12, he had composed his first opera. By 25, he had written music no human mind should be able to produce. The myth says he was touched by the divine, untouchable, beyond judgment. That myth is a lie. Here is what forensic historians have documented. In 2009, DNA analysis was performed on the skull displayed for over a century in Salzburg as Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's remains. The result was definitive. The skull belonged to an unrelated woman. Mozart's actual remains have never been identified. The world's most celebrated composer was buried in an unmarked pauper's grave. No one attended. I was the greatest musician who ever lived. They put me in the ground like a dog. My father built me into a machine. The machine played, the machine produced, and then the machine broke. And I want you to understand why. The central question forensic historians cannot agree on is this: did Leopold Mozart, the man who gave Wolfgang life, who dragged him across 6 European nations before the boy was 10, did Leopold systematically manufacture the conditions that destroyed him? That is what we are here to determine. Vienna, 1791. Mozart is 35 years old. He has not slept properly in 3 months. His apartment on Rauhensteingasse is cold. His wife Constanza has been ill. His debts are catastrophic. Over 3,000 florins owed to a single creditor. His last opera, The Magic Flute, opened 6 weeks ago to popular success. Mozart did not benefit financially. He is composing a Requiem, commissioned by an anonymous stranger. The messenger who delivered the commission wore grey and refused to give a name. Mozart has requested the fee 3 times. The stranger has refused. In this room, in this cold, Mozart begins to believe something.
I believed the stranger was death, not metaphorically. I told Constanza, he has come for me. The Requiem is for me. I am composing my own funeral. She told me I was ill. She was correct, but I was also right.
The beloved image of Mozart as a free artistic spirit, the version sold by the 1984 film Amadeus and by 2 centuries of romantic biography, is a systematic fabrication. Mozart spent his entire professional career attempting to secure permanent court employment. He was not a rebel. He was a desperate man trying to enter a system that kept rejecting him. In 1781, Archbishop Hieronymus Colloredo of Salzburg dismissed Mozart from court service. The physical removal was carried out by a court official named Count Arco, who, documented in Mozart's own letters, kicked him through a door. The greatest composer in Europe was removed from employment by a boot.
I noted it, the humiliation. I noted every humiliation. My father taught me that. He taught me that my value was conditional, that I performed correctly or I had no value.
Leopold Mozart's letters to his son, recovered, translated, and analyzed in full, contain a systematic pattern that modern psychologists who have reviewed the correspondence classify as coercive control. Leopold told Wolfgang repeatedly, across hundreds of letters, that Wolfgang's talent was Leopold's achievement,
that every opportunity Wolfgang received was Leopold's gift, that any independence Wolfgang attempted was an act of betrayal against the man who built him. One documented letter, written when Wolfgang was 25, contains this exact construction, that Wolfgang owed his very existence to Leopold's sacrifice, and that any failure to repay that debt would be a sin against God. Leopold used God as a leverage instrument.
He loved me. I believe that. He also needed me to be dependent. Those two things were not a contradiction to him. They were the same thing.
When Leopold Mozart lay dying in 1787, Wolfgang was in Vienna. He did not travel to Salzburg. He did not return for the death. His final letter to his father, written when Leopold had weeks to live, contains no expression of grief, no longing, no reconciliation. It contains a clinical discussion of death as a natural, necessary process. Mozart, the man who wept over his Requiem, who told his wife that a stranger had come to collect him, felt nothing for the man who built him, or he had already spent that grief long before Leopold was in the ground.
But there was a problem. Leopold Mozart was not a monster. He was a musician, a court composer of modest talent in Salzburg, who had identified in his infant son something he could not explain and could not ignore. When Wolfgang was 3, he learned harpsichord pieces by ear. When he was 4, he composed a concerto Leopold understood, with the precision of a man who had spent his life mediocre, that he was in the presence of something impossible, and he made a decision that any ambitious parent in 18th century Europe might have made. He invested everything. He took his son on the road. He removed the child from a normal life and placed him in the machinery of aristocratic patronage, because that was the only mechanism available for a talent like Wolfgang's to reach the world. The mechanism destroyed the child, but that was not Leopold's intention.
He believed he was saving me. He believed the only safe place for what I was under his control, that the world would consume me without him. He was not entirely wrong.
Wolfgang Mozart's fatal flaw was not recklessness, it was not arrogance. It was the one psychological wound his father had engineered with perfect precision: the inability to believe his own value was real without external validation. He spent money he did not have on clothes and entertainment and status, because Leopold had taught him that status was survival. He chased court appointments he could not secure, because Leopold had taught him that security required institutional approval. He died in debt, composing a requiem for a stranger, because the machine his father built was still running, long after the man who built it was gone. Not a monster, not a victim, something more complicated and more terrifying. A man who internalized his architect so completely that he could not function without the architecture.
Here is what I know now. The anonymous commissioner of my Requiem was Count Franz von Walsegg, a Viennese nobleman who collected commissioned works and presented them to his guests as his own compositions at private concerts. He purchased music the way other men purchased furniture. He wanted my Requiem so he could perform it at his wife's memorial and tell the room it was his. The last music I ever wrote was going to be stolen from me before I was cold. My father took my childhood. The archbishop took my employment. The patrons took my music and gave back barely enough to survive. And at the end, a stranger in grey came to take the last thing I had left. I chose to finish it anyway.
Mozart died on December 5th, 1791,
at 12:55 in the morning. He was 35 years old. His physician, Dr. Thomas Franz Closet, recorded cause of death as severe miliary fever, a diagnosis so imprecise it explained nothing and covered everything. On the afternoon of December the 4th, less than 12 hours before his death, Mozart gathered his friends. He conducted sections of the unfinished Requiem from his bed. When they reached the lacrimosa, the weeping movement, Mozart stopped. He put the score down. He never picked it up again. The lacrimosa in the finished score breaks off at bar 8. That is where his hand stopped.
Constanze could not afford a private grave. Mozart was buried in a communal plot at St. Mark's Cemetery. By the time anyone tried to locate the exact grave, the records were gone. The plot had been reused. The Requiem was completed after Mozart's death by his student, Franz Xaver Sussmayer. Count von Walsegg performed it in 1793 as his own composition. The deception held for years. Mozart did not live to see the theft completed, but he knew it was coming. He chose to finish it anyway. That was the choice. That was his. No one can take it back. But here is the question forensic historians cannot answer. Count von Walsegg's identity as the anonymous commissioner was kept secret for years after Mozart's death, revealed only gradually and incompletely in subsequent decades. The official record, maintained by Constanze Mozart herself in the years that followed, obscured certain details of the commission. Constanze had financial interest in controlling the Requiem's provenance. She negotiated its sale multiple times. She suppressed certain letters. She shaped the narrative of Mozart's final months with the precision of someone who understood that the myth was worth more than the man.
The question that cannot be definitively answered: did Mozart know who had commissioned the Requiem before he died? And did Constanze know that he knew? If Mozart died composing a piece he knew would be stolen, and if Constanze knew and said nothing, then the story of the dying genius and his faithful wife is not a love story. It is something considerably more complicated.
Next confession. The man who claimed to have invented a weapon that could split the earth in two, and the men who made sure that weapon was never found after he died alone in room 3327 of the New Yorker Hotel. What was in the trunk the government confiscated the morning after his death? Some secrets are meant to be buried, others are meant to be told. See you in the next confession.